While the world continues to deal with the Russia-Ukraine war, I'm here to talk about something else. It's connected but unconnected. It's the US-India relationship. It's taken a very different turn since 2005 after the civilian nuclear agreement. The Cold War days were history. The relationship has been evolving in the last decade. In the Cold War days, India used to be part of the Russian bloc, and the US was a supporter of Pakistan and China. The lines were redrawn. China was now an adversary of the US. Pakistan did not have the US's trust. And the US was working to make India an adversary of China. But the Russia-Ukraine conflict has tested the India-US relationship. Many think it will survive the shock, but many also believe that there is no trust in the relationship. They say that negotiations between India and the US will happen with closed doors. But this exchange between the foreign ministers showed that it was not all hunky-dory. The Indian foreign minister was blooding the nose of the Americans on double standards.
If you are looking at energy purchases from Russia, I would suggest that your attention should be focused on Europe, which probably we do buy some energy which is necessary for our energy security. But I suspect, looking at the figures, probably our total purchases for the month would be less than what Europe does in an afternoon.
US Secretary of State Antony Blinken was blunt about Indian oil imports from Russia.
When it comes to oil purchases, sanctions, et cetera, I just note that there are carve-outs for energy purchases. Of course, we're encouraging countries not to purchase additional energy supplies from Russia. Every country is differently situated, has different needs, requirements, but we're looking to allies and partners not to increase their purchases of Russian energy.
The Indian decision has a lot of background. Much has changed from the Cold War days. The Soviet Union disintegrated and became weak, and now it is resurrecting itself as a military power. China, from being a sweatshop for the West, has become a financial power bloc in itself. India has also come a long way through leveraging information technology to become a global powerhouse of talent. But all said, the US-India relationship is going to suffer if India continues to take the journey of taking imports from Russia in the long term. In a recent visit to India, the United States Deputy National Security Advisor, Dalip Singh, was unusually blunt in his remarks about the consequences for any country trying to backfill sanctions imposed on Russia. The US and other European countries have been coercive towards developing nations, which are importers of Russian oil and other commodities. But you have to remember that this has a background as well. The days when India and the US were not great friends. The US supported Pakistan and Saudis backed Pakistan entirely. The Americans at that time were importing their crude from Saudi Arabia. India had a very poor relationship with Saudi Arabia. The US didn't care a hang about the Indian issue around Saudi groups backing terror in India. Nothing stopped the US from then forging ties with them. It was 9/11 that changed all that. The US realized how dangerous a game they had played for oil and profit. But today, India and Saudi Arabia are friends. India's energy needs are fast growing. It will take oil from where it can get. India has invested heavily in Russian oil fields. It takes oil from a US retractor in Venezuela as well. Iran continues to be a part of its strategy. But the US continues to insist that India take clean energy, as it calls it, clean from its point of view. But the US didn't care too much earlier when its own needs were not met. Today, the US is moreover self-sufficient. It has controlled oil from the last century, but India is not backing down this time, at least in the optics. India is pushing back, saying that if European powers like Germany and France, which are one of the biggest importers of Russian energy, and are still continuing their purchases, then why is the US focusing on India to not import? This kind of diplomacy reveals the racist hypocrisy of the West. Defending India's stance on continuing imports from Moscow, the Ministry of External Affairs has stated that being a sovereign nation, India has the ability and freedom to act for its interests, and that political coloring should not be attributed to the actions of India. The impact of this war has started affecting the Indian markets as the prices of oil and other commodities like rice have flared up. It's already hurting the pockets of the common man. In another racist attack on India, Fox Nation host Tucker Carlson was in discussion with Amy Wax, who is a law professor at the University of Pennsylvania. She called India a shithole country while attacking Indians that came from an entitled part of the caste structure.
Yet, on some level, their country is a shithole, excuse my language.
India is very clear about how it would handle its future. It was one of the founding nations of the non-aligned movement. Though the movement is itself dead, India makes calls by not interfering in issues of other states and joining groups of nations to discriminate. In the case of Russia, it is even more careful, as Russia has provided Pakistan with weapons and India wants to make sure that it balances the relationship between the US and Russia, so that both know that India would not join one bloc or the other. One of the most telling statements that is followed by nations around the world came from the American diplomat Henry Kissinger, that America has no permanent friends or enemies, only interests. And the Ukraine-Russia war has clearly shown that it is a statement many nations will continue following.